Crested Butte, Colorado. End of summer 1885. Abigail Hawthorne stood on the steps of the train, ready to get off the platform. She was immediately surrounded by competing smells. The fresh pine wind from the Rocky Mountains battled with the mechanical steam spirit of the train, and both mingled with a smoky fog emanating from the small town. Only a few hundred people lived here, but the town served more than 1,000 miners in the area. She straightened the bustle of her dress and tucked under her arm the small pillow on which she had sat on the train. Fortunately, her dress was not typical of the East, with a bulky bustle, otherwise the trip would have become unbearable. 3 companions were waiting for her below, and 2 of them stood out strongly against the background of the local residents. The first was a short, thin, balding man in a smart suit and glasses. Edmund Horace was a Denver lawyer who had been her father's lawyer for several years. It bothered Abby that he rarely smiled, and when he did, she would tremble. The opposite of him was a man who was called the Swede. Jonas Svensson was a real mountain of flesh and muscle. He was almost 2 heads taller than Mr. Horace and 3 times wider in chest. Abby wondered how he found suspenders that could hold his pants on those shoulders. In addition to his impressive physique, he was covered in bright blonde hair. From his long, unkempt mane to his thick beard, hairy chest and arms, he reminded her of a huge golden bear. She would have recognized the third man in any crowd. Although he was dressed like most of the locals, Abby could recognize his walk and manner of speaking anywhere. He was an attractive man with black curly hair and a thick black beard. His big blue eyes and charming smile made him stand out from the crowd. In addition, he had been her husband for 5 years, Thomas Hawthorne. "Stay close," her husband warned her, helping her down. "This is no place for you." "You know better," she thought, barely holding back her sarcastic remarks. She knew it was in his blood. This was his life long before he returned home. She looked into his eyes and saw the excitement in them that he tried in vain to hide. A year ago, such a look would have made her heart beat faster, but now it was just a reminder of what she had to give up. Like a moth to a flame or Icarus to the sun, she sighed to herself. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Horace intervened, "please stay very close to us." Unfortunately, in these parts, an attractive woman is a greater rarity than the gold and silver that these men are looking for. "Thank you, Mr. Horace, but my husband and S.H. Ved are armed, and I'm sure she's gun is somewhere nearby. I feel quite protected. However, I will be careful and stay close." Horace nodded and turned to Swede. "Take our things, and I'll find this Buckman and transport." The Swede muttered something in response and nodded. He rarely spoke. Abby always thought he just didn't speak English well, although he seemed to understand everything perfectly. Abby looked at her husband and noticed the smile hidden behind his beard. His eyes carefully studied the city as if he was looking for something. "Do you really miss this?" "What?" he asked, his face reflecting surprise. "You look at this place like you look at a lost lover." "Well, it's a little dramatic, but yeah, sometimes I miss it." "So, are you planning to leave again?" she hissed. "Damn it, woman, keep your poison to yourself." "Yes, I miss it, but I'm still here, aren't I? I'm still married to you and live on the ranch." "Listen, Abby," he sighed, "I know that you are not happy about this trip. I'm not eager to date him either." Abby took a deep breath and calmed down. She knew her husband was right. For the past 4 months, she had been on the verge of a breakdown. Everything around her seemed to be collapsing. And now she had to meet her ex-husband, and it promised to be a real nightmare. "Sorry, Thomas. You're right, this trip is throwing me off balance. Everything has gone wrong since Sarah ran away last May, and now I have to see Jeremiah again, and it brings back too many bad memories. You know that this meeting is inevitable. As for Sarah, I told you I didn't do what she's accusing me of. She's still angry about her father. I'm sorry she ran away." "I know," Abby replied. "She never forgave us for getting married. In those days, you drank a lot." "Damn it, Abby, not here and not now," he growled. Abby turned away and looked at the small mining town. She forced herself not to think about the past months and remembered happier times. She moved to Colorado Territory with her father, Henry Thompson, when she was only 6 years old. They left Pennsylvania a few months after her mother died. The year was 1860, just a few years before the Great War between the states. They arrived in Colorado after the Pikes Peak or Bust Gold Rush. Father was looking not for gold, but for other wealth. He bought a ranch that was one of three in a small valley at the southeastern base of Pikes Peak. This valley could become very valuable if a railroad were built there. Their ranch was adjacent to two others, the Old Wilson Estate and the Hawthorne Ranch. Old Man Wilson lived up to his nickname and seemed to be hostile to almost everyone. But the Hawthorne family was heaven sent. With so few children in the area, Abby was lucky to have two in her neighborhood who were almost her age. Abigail immediately became friends with the two Hawthorne brothers, Thomas and Jeremiah. She was the same age as Jeremiah, and Thomas was a couple of years older. The trio quickly became inseparable. Abby smiled, remembering the endless hours they spent together after completing their daily duties. Even then, the brothers were complete opposites. When they played, Jeremiah was always the lawman and Thomas was the robber, and she got the role of a damsel in distress or a princess. It's funny how I was drawn to someone who always wanted freedom, even back then, she reproached herself. Well, I caught him, what a fool. It's no wonder he's now eager to hit the road again. They had only lived on the ranch for a few years when the war began. Colorado was largely untouched by the fighting, but it had a profound impact on the Hawthorne family. Thomas and Jeremiah's father went to the front when the boys were only 11 and 9 years old. He was away for 2 years, but when he returned, he was a completely different person. Abby remembered him as cheerful and loud, but he returned home a crippled and broken man. He lost his right arm and was partially blind in his right eye. But the worst thing is that he lost his spirit. Abby could count on her fingers the number of times she had heard him laugh since his return. My father said that he died in the war, but his body simply did not want to go to the grave. His condition became a heavy burden for the family. Mrs. Hawthorne looked after him, but it was clear that she had no interest in running the ranch, so Thomas and Jeremiah took charge of the ranch under their father's supervision. Abigail dreamed of staying in the valley and raising her family here. Jeremiah seemed to share this dream. Thomas dreamed of something else. His rebellious spirit and thirst for adventure led him to unknown distances. She loved them both. Jeremiah was her fortress, her knight in shining armor. Thomas was her pirate who stole her heart. Like many dreams, it was shattered by reality. Shortly after his 17th birthday, Thomas left to seek his fortune in the mountains. It broke her heart, but made the choice obvious. Jeremiah became her future. At the age of 16, they got married. Their marriage didn't start off easy. Jeremiah was upset to learn that Abby was not a virgin. She gave herself to Thomas before he left. It took them a while, but they were able to overcome it, and their lives began to improve. The only other difficult period was when Sarah was born. The birth was difficult, but the daughter was born healthy. Unfortunately, Abby was unable to bear any more children. Abby was heartbroken, but Jeremiah was her rock. His love and care helped her cope, and her feelings for him only intensified. But that wasn't enough, was it? She thought. Henry Thompson was as busy as anyone else at the time. A small village grew up at the mouth of the valley. It was very tiny, only about 50 people lived in it, but it already had the basics of a real city. It had a general store, a church, a blacksmith shop, and a boarding house with a tiny saloon attached to the back. Abby knew that her father had a stake in almost all of these establishments. No wonder the village was named Thompsonville. Abby and Jeremiah had been married for just over 6 years when Mr. Hawthorne passed away quietly. It is not surprising that Mrs. Hawthorne decided to go to San Francisco to live with her sister. Jeremiah told Abby that his father had left the ranch to him and Thomas with the condition that they would take care of their mother. A year later, in 1877, a war broke out between the railroads. Denver and Rio Grande Railway and Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway for rights of access to lands. The most famous incident was the standoff between Bat Masterson and his Dodge City mercenaries hired by the railroad. AT and SF captured the locomotive depot in Pueblo. Representative D and RG ended up bribing them to leave. During those years, there were rumors of farms being burned and families being driven off their lands. There was fear in the valley. It was then that her father brought Swede to the ranch. Despite the presence of the Swede, the railway war still affected the valley. The Wilson family's ranch burned down one night. Old Wilson's grandson and his young wife had arrived at the ranch just a couple of months earlier to help with the farming. Old Wilson died in the fire, and his grandson suffered severe burns. Within a week, the grandson and his wife left the valley, but not before they sold the ranch to Henry Thompson. Her father said they did it because his grandson couldn't rebuild the farm, and they wanted to keep it out of the hands of the railroad companies, at least for a while. Jeremiah always doubted the details of these events, and his relationship with his father-in-law deteriorated greatly. This took a huge toll on her marriage, and Abby felt like she was constantly defending her father to Jeremiah. As the railroad war continued, their marriage slowly began to crumble. They began to quarrel more and more often and went to bed less and less often without feeling angry towards each other. Gone were those nights of passion when he breathed hotly in her face, declaring his right to her. Abby yearned even more for those nights of tender love when it seemed to her that they were becoming one. She missed his tight hugs and his soothing voice that promised everything would be okay. She knew they had both failed each other. She stubbornly rejected many of his attempts at intimacy, and he eventually gave in, succumbing to his frustration and anger. After some time, Jeremiah told her that he had to leave to sort out a matter and would be gone for several days. When she asked where he was going, he responded evasively, saying that he just wanted to make sure of something. 2 days later, he left. The next day, the nightmare began at the Hawthorne Ranch. It was 2 months before Abby was able to come face to face with Jeremiah. With a heavy sigh, Abby closed her eyes and remembered one of the worst days of her life. Thompsonville, Colorado. Spring 1880. Jeremiah cautiously approached the ranch house. He felt that something was wrong. The last 2 months have been extremely difficult for him. He first went to Leadville to check out his father's investments. After making sure that everything was in order there, he headed to Denver to find out exactly when Henry Thompson registered the rights to the Wilson Ranch. Something about the dates didn't add up to how Abby said the events happened. He walked into the law office that Henry used and asked a few questions. He was told that he should talk to Mr. Horace, who was due back in a couple of hours. Jeremiah went to the saloon across the street to wait. 30 minutes later, a stranger approached him, accused him of insulting his family, and hit him. Within minutes, both were in the Denver City Jail. He was tried and found guilty, despite the fact that he swore that he had never seen the man before. 30 days later, he was given another month of imprisonment for unknown reasons. After his release, he went back to the law office, but was told that Mr. Horace had left town and the documents he was looking for had disappeared. When he got to Thompsonville, everything seemed strange to him. At the saloon, he learned that Pedro and Maria Mendez had left. The new owner sent him away, declaring that he was not welcome here. They were waiting for him at the ranch. Abby was there with her father, Swede, and a small, well-dressed man. To his surprise, Jeremiah saw Thomas next to them. Volume. Jeremiah smiled. When did you return? About 6 weeks ago, Thomas answered coldly. Jeremiah was surprised by his brother's reaction, but immediately turned his gaze to his wife. Approaching her, he tried to hug her, but felt her palm hit his face. Scoundrel, Abby screamed. How could you do this to me? What are you talking about, Abby? Maria Mendez, and don't you dare pretend like you don't know what I mean. I'm not pretending. I really don't know what you're talking about. Maria and Pedro visited us 2 days after you ran away. I didn't run away. I went to Denver to figure something out before I talked to you. I was slandered there and put in prison. Why did you go to Denver? Abby, we need to talk about this in private. No. Everything will be said here and now. Maria told me everything. What are you talking about, woman? Maria said she was pregnant. "Oh, Lord," Jeremiah snorted. "Whoever the father is, he better run before Pedro gets to him." "She said it was you, you bastard. She said, you are the father." "I?" Jeremiah asked in shock. "And she's right," Henry interjected. "Pedro was not happy and went to look for you." "Pedro didn't talk to me," Jeremiah said. "This is not funny, guys." "No, it's not funny, son," Henry said in a patronizing tone. "Don't ever call me that, do you hear?" Jeremiah hissed. "I'm not your boy, and I never touched Maria. Abby, you have to believe me. She said you did it, and then you shot her, Pepe." "What?" Jeremiah muttered. "Is Pedro dead?" "No," Henry said calmly. "You just wounded him in the arm." "I didn't shoot Pedro, and I sure as hell never slept with Maria." "That's not what others say," Henry continued. "And that's not what they told the sheriff from Colorado Springs." "This is a lie. Where are they? I will get to the bottom of the truth." "They've already left," Abby screamed with tears in her eyes. "Yes," Henry said calmly. "They left shortly after speaking with the sheriff. I think they headed to Santa Fe or further south." "What? They just abandoned their hotel and saloon?" "No, I bought them so they could have money to start over somewhere else." "It stinks, Henry. It smells like someone is trying to set me up." Jeremiah turned to his wife. "Abby, you can't believe." Jeremiah's heart sank when he saw her in the arms of Thomas, who was comforting her. His expression changed from anger to deep sadness. "No," he groaned. "Abby, please tell me that's not true." "Thomas, why are you hugging my wife?" "She was hurt, Jeremiah. After what you did, she was hurt." "I didn't do anything," Jeremiah responded coldly as his anger began to return. "So you came back just in time to take my place. Is this what you want to tell me, dear brother? How long have you been sleeping in my bed?" Thomas didn't say anything, just hugged Abby tighter. "You bastard," Jeremiah growled and moved towards Thomas. Unfortunately, he was so focused on the couple that he didn't notice the huge shadow moving towards him. The Swede hit him once, but it was enough to knock Jeremiah out. When he came to, he was lying on the floor inside the house. He stood up with difficulty and leaned against the wall to maintain his balance. In front of him sat Henry and a short, well-dressed man. The Swede stood next to them, and Abby and Thomas stood behind them. "Where's Sarah?" he croaked. "She's at my ranch," Henry said calmly. "We decided that she didn't need to see this mess." "Are you ashamed, Henry? You should be ashamed." "Sorry, Jeremiah, but that sounds pretty hypocritical coming from a man who knocked up a girl and then shot her father." "I didn't do it." "They say he did." Jeremiah looked around the room, looking for someone who could believe him, but he didn't find anyone. "Despite your denials," Henry continued, "there is something you need to know. The Colorado Springs Sheriff has already issued a warrant for your arrest. Mr. Horace, and I convinced him not to produce it yet." "Mr. Horace?" "Yes, Mr. Horace is my lawyer from Denver. I already mentioned him." "This is the one I was looking for in Denver. They said that you have the documents that I was looking for, papers about Henry's acquisition of Old Man Wilson's ranch." "Why were you looking for them?" Henry asked. "Because the date you say Wilson's grandson sold you the ranch is not the date the deed was supposedly signed. If my calculations are correct, these papers were written before Old Man Wilson died in the fire. That means you're lying." "This is absurd," Henry snorted. "I have nothing to do with this." "Mr. Hawthorne, I assure you, you are mistaken," added Mr. Horace. "So where are these documents? Your office said you have them." "They were wrong. I don't have them." "This is all nonsense," Henry interrupted. "All of this is an attempt by a guilty person to denigrate others in order to soften the severity of his own actions. Boy, you have to understand that I am the only thing stopping this warrant from going into effect. Now, if you don't want to become a criminal, I advise you to listen carefully. Mr. Horace prepared the papers. Sign them, and your share of the ranch will go to Thomas. In exchange for this, no warrant will be presented. Your wife and daughter will be provided for the rest of your life. My wife is a cheater, and my brother is a traitor. Abby gasped and grabbed onto Thomas. Jeremiah took a step forward, but the Swede blocked his path. Sit, don't make me hit you again, the giant growled. Jeremiah looked into the faces of his accusers. He realized that he had lost. He had no choice but to retreat. He agreed to their terms and asked to say goodbye to Sarah. He was refused. She had already been told that he ran away a month ago. That day, Jeremiah Hawthorne left the valley a defeated man. Crested, Colorado. End of summer 1885. Abby, remembering that terrible day, wiped a small tear from her eye. Jeremiah seemed so sincere at the time, denying his actions, but the evidence against him said otherwise. She was also tormented by thoughts about her actions at that time. Did I give up on our marriage too quickly? She asked herself. What if Jeremiah told the truth and didn't run away? Then it turns out that I really was an adulteress. Abby was in complete emotional turmoil after meeting Maria. She couldn't get through those first days without crying hysterically. 2 weeks after that meeting, Thomas returned. She wished she could say she didn't run into his arms, but she knew that wasn't the case. She found consolation in him, salvation from the storm that was tearing her world apart. 2 weeks after his return, he found her himself. From then on, he shared her bed. When Jeremiah returned, he realized the truth. She had left him for Thomas. 3 months after the confrontation with Jeremiah, Thomas and Abby got married. Sarah was beside herself. She could not believe that her father could have committed the acts of which he was accused. She was too young and naive. Naive? She was just a girl. What excuse did I have? Why didn't I take Jeremiah's side then? Why did I choose my father and then Thomas over my husband? These questions have haunted her throughout recent years, questions to which she had no answers. With the exception of Sarah, the following years were relatively quiet. Her marriage to Thomas turned out to be difficult. Thomas became increasingly withdrawn and emotionally distant. When he learned of his mother's death 3 years ago, he simply brushed aside any feelings. Abby knew he hadn't seen her in over 15 years, but she hoped he wouldn't be so heartless. As Thomas continued to hide his feelings, Abby felt increasingly distant from her husband. Added to this was Abby's growing suspicion that Thomas had been unfaithful to her. She feared it was during his monthly trips to Colorado Springs. She accused him of this several times, but he denied each time. Unfortunately, she didn't have any evidence. Now his anxiety began to surface again. She saw that sometimes he hated being tied to the ranch, and his drinking became increasingly uncontrollable. 4 months ago, everything exploded. Sarah always hated Thomas for trying to take her father's place. It seemed as if her anger towards him was only building. She often got insolent with Thomas, and he threatened her that he would spank her. One night, while Abby was at her father's ranch, he actually did it. Sarah claimed he went further. She said he touched her womanhood. Thomas vehemently denied this. Abby didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to believe, the drunken husband who might have crossed the line, or the angry daughter who might have lied to get revenge on the man she blamed for her father's departure. Abby was confused. Henry then intervened. He chastised Sarah for trying to create a scandal in the midst of negotiations with the railroad. He believed that Thomas should not have punished her in this way, but also believed that Sarah had misinterpreted what had happened. Sarah was heartbroken and ran to her room. Abby tried to console her, but Sarah did not allow her to do so, since her mother sided with Thomas and her grandfather. Much to Abby's regret, she left her daughter alone. 2 weeks later, Sarah ran away. They searched for her for several days, even receiving a report that she had been seen in Colorado Springs. But the trail ended there. Abby cried for days, and Thomas tried to console her. Even now, Abby sometimes cried at night thinking about her daughter. Luckily, 2 months ago, they received word that Sarah was alive and well in Leadville. She was found by accident because the man who discovered her was not looking for her at all, but for Jeremiah. Several months ago, Henry discovered that Thomas did not own a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch. It turned out that Mr. Hawthorne had mortgaged 51% of the ranch to obtain a loan to purchase a small business in Leadville. Income from the business provided Mrs. Hawthorne after her husband's death. After Mrs. Hawthorne's death, the business and interest in the ranch passed to Jeremiah. Jeremiah now owned a controlling interest in the Hawthorne ranch. Henry hired a man to find Jeremiah. During the search, he accidentally found Sarah. She lived and worked as a maid for a wealthy widow named Wilcox in Leadville. Several weeks later, Jeremiah was found near Ashcroft. Now Abby and her companions were heading there to persuade Jeremiah to sell or sign the transfer of part of his interest in the ranch. The meeting promised to be emotionally difficult and unpleasant. "This is a bad idea," Abby said evenly. "What?" Thomas asked. "I said this is a very bad idea." "We don't have much choice." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Horace added, "we need to do everything possible to convince your ex-husband to sign at least a small part of your ranch. The deal your father is working on with the railroad requires full access through the valley. I understand that, Mr. Horace, but I don't know how we'll do it. If Jeremiah still believes that we betrayed him and set him up, we have little chance of offering him anything worthwhile. This is wrong. Besides the decent amount of money I'm bringing with me, we have other incentives." "You don't think that an apology from Thomas or me will convince him?" "No, on their own, no," Horace explained. "However, coupled with a large sum of money and possibly shares in the assets of many Thompsonville businesses, this should ease the animosity. We will propose to finally remove the old arrest warrant from him. We will also provide information about Sarah's whereabouts. This way he can be reunited with her. I think this will help seal the deal." "I'm not sure, Mr. Horace," she thought. That look of pain and betrayal in his eyes that day. This look haunted her for years. There was a screaming innocence in him in the face of incriminating evidence. She was so hurt by his betrayal that it seemed to tear her heart out. Even though their marriage was in bad shape, Abby loved Jeremiah. His long absence and her heartache left her lost and alone. When Thomas returned, she ran straight into his arms. He was there at her most difficult moment. Abby's thoughts were interrupted by a loud voice coming from an approaching fat man with a wide smile. "Yes, sir. We'll get you to Ashcroft in no time." The man stopped in front of the group. "So, are you ready? We're leaving any minute. The ride will be a little slow and some parts of the road quite bumpy, but we should get to Ashcroft this afternoon. We'll go through Pearl Pass, a beautiful place, but the road there is not the easiest." Abby immediately realized that this was Mr. Buckman. The man did not shut up the entire time the group walked to his stagecoach, continuing to talk even while loading luggage. It wasn't until they left Crested that he finally caught his breath. "I'm surprised you didn't take the stagecoach from Aspen. There used to be 2 stagecoaches a day leaving Ashcroft. That was about a year ago, but that's the beast, right?" "What do you mean?" asked Horace. "There are hundreds of boomtowns like Ashcroft scattered all over these mountains," Buckman laughed. "Someone finds gold or silver, and everyone runs there. Of course, a city immediately grows in this place, but as soon as the gold runs out, everyone runs to the next rumor about a new find. That's what happened with Ashcroft. About 5 years ago, a pair of prospectors stumbled upon a rich deposit of silver. When they returned to Leadville, word spread and a gold rush began. Within a few years, a city grew with a population of more than 3,000 people. Damn it, there were more than 20 saloons, 2 newspapers, and even a school in the city. Horace Tabor's wife tried to make the city respectable a couple of years ago. She threw a big reception for a bunch of all sorts of aristocrats. Never before have I seen so many important people in these parts. But nothing could save the city when the silver ran out. It only took a few months for Ashcroft to begin to resemble a ghost town. Now I only go there a couple of times a month. I am most often hired by hunting groups from Leadville or Denver." "Hunting group. Yeah, they always go to the Jenkins house. Sometimes it's John Jenkins himself, and sometimes it's a friend of his named Ambrose from Denver. He is, in my opinion, an aristocrat, if you know what I mean. When this Ambrose travels, he always takes a big black guy with him. He's not as big as you, said Buckman, looking at the Swede, but he's also healthy. Is this hunting party there now? Thomas asked. Yeah, Buckman grinned. I took them there 5 days ago. Ambrose, this black guy, and this other skinny guy. Skinny guy? Asked Horace. Yes, a teenager. He looks sickly, a little pampered, if you know what I mean. Never speaks, but always accompanies both groups, be it Jenkins or Ambrose. I think they're trying to make a man out of him. Maybe they hope that hunting and fishing will give him more courage. Although, if you want to know my opinion, nothing works out for them. Buckman laughed loudly at his own joke. Mr. Buckman, Abby asked carefully, do you know a man named Jeremiah Hawthorne? I don't remember, ma'am, but there is a man on the Jenkins ranch named Jeremiah. He is the guide for these hunting groups. I've never heard the name Hawthorne, but it might be him. You could ask old Zeb when we get to Ashcroft. His daughter and granddaughter live on the Jenkins ranch, so they should know. Do they live there? Yeah, Desiree, that's Zeb's daughter. She used to help him run the View Hotel. She's a real beauty, tall as an Amazon and mean as a rattlesnake. So she got pregnant and her husband died, or vice versa. I don't know exactly what happened before, and I certainly won't ask her or old Zeb. Both of them will probably bite my head off. So, John Jenkins built a very beautiful house for his wife, and she went back to Leadville. Then Jenkins brought Desiree there to look after the house. Now, of course, I don't want to say anything about Jenkins and Desiree, but she's a damn beauty. The rest of the way, Buckman showed them picturesque landscapes. Abby couldn't help but smile when he started saying something that she knew wasn't entirely true, but he was damn funny. When they pulled into a scroft, Abby immediately understood why Buckman called it a ghost town. Dozens of tent frames and dilapidated buildings could be seen everywhere. However, several buildings looked quite good. 2 of them especially caught her attention. The first was a 2-story hotel called the Hotel View, and the second was the solidly built Blue Mirror Saloon. However, the most noticeable thing was the absence of people. Only a few passers-by could be seen on the street. Buckman stopped the stagecoach in front of the View Hotel. Jumping down, he looked around the hotel and then looked towards the few remaining saloons. Zeb, Buckman shouted loudly. You have guests. 3 elderly men emerged from one of the saloons. Of course, he's in the Blue Mirror, Buckman grinned. One of the men walked towards them. He was a short man with a shaggy beard and gray hair. His wide smile revealed several missing teeth. Good evening, friends, he said in a thick Creole accent. Welcome to Hotel View. Take your things and go. We will get you settled. These people, Buckman continued, will need someone to take them to. Mr. Buckman, Horace interrupted. Thank you for your help, but then we're on our own. As you say, Buckman shrugged with a smile. Let me know when you are ready to leave. I'll be here the day after tomorrow to pick up the hunting party, but I can come another day if necessary. No, sir, answered Horace. The day after tomorrow will be just right. Abby and her companions went up to their rooms, then came down and gathered on the porch. She noticed that a mule-drawn cart was already parked at the entrance. Horace explained that he had already told Zeb what they needed and that he would take them to their destination. The Jenkins estate was further south, near Taylor's Summit. Before they had gone far from a scroft, Horace asked Zeb a direct question. Mr. Palvey's just Zeb. Okay, Zeb. You didn't seem surprised when I asked you to take us to the Jenkins estate. Why be surprised? The old Creole grinned. A month ago, a stranger came to town and asked about Jeremiah. It was not difficult to realize that something was fishy here. If this had happened a year or 2 ago, no one would have paid any attention. But now that almost everyone has left, anyone who asks questions about one of the few who remain is immediately caught out. How many people are left in a scroft? Thomas asked. About 100, give or take, Zeb answered. A couple of years ago, more than 3,500 people lived here. But the silver dried up, and then they found a large vein near Aspen. Most left before winter. Now only a handful remain in the city, with several dozen more mining ore nearby. Sir, Abby said softly, Mr. Buckman mentioned that you have a daughter and granddaughter living at the Jenkins estate. Buckman talks too much, Zeb snorted. I hope you didn't tell him anything that you wouldn't want everyone within a 20-mile radius to know tomorrow morning. He shook his head and looked over his shoulder at Abby. Yes, ma'am, my granddaughter's name is Monique, but we call her Lil Mo. She and her mother have been living on the Jenkins estate for 4 years. She used to help me at the hotel until she got pregnant. Mr. Jenkins was kind enough to let them stay in the house and look after him. She and Jeremiah now take care of the house when Mr. Jenkins moves away, and he leaves often because Mrs. Jenkins didn't like it here. She preferred her big house in Leadville. Aren't you afraid for their safety? Abby asked. Of course, it's scary, but no more than any man for his family. Desiree knows how to stand up for herself. And then there's Jeremiah and Robbie. Robbie, however, is simple-minded, but loyal as a hound. The remaining employees left for Aspen last fall. And of course, these dogs. Dogs? Thomas asked. Yes, several years ago, Mr. Jenkins found 3 abandoned puppies. It turned out they were half-wolves. Shy, but excellent guard dogs. Jenkins's older dogs accepted them into the pack. They now run around together and are very territorial. Everyone was surprised by how quickly they became attached to my Desiree and Lil Mo. 2 years ago, a pair of prospectors approached the house at night. The dogs killed one and mutilated the other. Abby gasped in horror as the 3 men listened with bated breath. So, ma'am, I'm not too worried. No more than any father. Will we be safe? Asked Horace. It must be. It's daytime, and I've been there so many times that they recognize me. I'll ring the bell for Desiree to remove them. Will Jeremiah be there? Abby asked softly. Hardly. Most likely, he led the Ambrose party on a hunting or fishing trip. They usually spend the night in the forest for a day or two, then return and leave again the next morning. As they approached the clearing, they saw a bell mounted on a pillar. Zeb got off the van, walked up to him, and called. He had barely returned to the van when they heard dogs barking and a woman's voice giving commands. A few moments later, another bell rang, this time twice. Zeb drove the wagon across the clearing. As they crested the hill, they saw a large 2-story house with a small outbuilding and a barn behind it. This must be the Jenkins property, Zeb announced. Slowly, they drove up to a fence made of split poles. Zeb jumped down and tied up the team of mules. Before he could say anything to his passengers, a high-pitched screech was heard. Daddy, the dark-haired girl shouted, running up to them. Zeb laughed and picked her up, and she squealed again. And this is Lil Mo. It's not high for us, but we still hope. Daddy, Mom says that I will still grow up. Speaking of your mother, Zeb said, smiling. Where is she? Right here, answered the smiling young woman standing on the porch. I'm waiting for your old skin to bring home that bag of curls you have there. She was tall, almost 6 feet tall, and quite beautiful, although dressed strangely. Her dark skin spoke of her Cajun heritage. She kept her long black locks in a simple ponytail and wore a simple dress, but she was wearing pants and had the front of her dress tucked in. Her soft smile faded as she looked at Abby and her companions. How can I help? We're here to see Jeremiah Hawthorne, Horace said. Is he at home? Who is asking him? My name is Edmund Horace, and we have a business proposal for him. And for this you need 4, she said, looking closely at the Swede. No, ma'am, Horace continued. This is Mr. Hawthorne's brother and ex-wife. They are here to talk to Jeremiah and heal old wounds. Mr. Swanson is here for our protection, since I have a large sum of money with me. Desiree nodded. Okay, I'll send Robbie to get him. He took a hunting party to Taylor Pass yesterday. Robbie, a tall, awkward guy of about 20, ran up to them. It was obvious that he was a little out of this world. One of his eyes was squinted, and one of his arms hung unnaturally. However, there was an infectious smile on his face. It became even brighter when he turned to Desiree. Yes, Miss Ree. Run for Jeremiah. He went with them to Taylor Pass. Yes, ma'am, Robbie grinned. And Robbie, make sure they hear you. I don't want you to get shot by accident." Robbie quickly ran away, but his laughter echoed throughout the yard for a long time. "I was expecting them tomorrow, but if Robbie finds them quickly, they'll be back in a couple of hours. You can wait in the house, but leave your revolvers at the entrance. There's a chest right behind the door. Put your weapons there. They'll be safe. But don't enter the house with a weapon, otherwise I'll unleash the dogs on you, okay?" Everyone nodded silently and followed her into the house. Desiree watched carefully as Thomas and the Swede placed their revolvers in the chest. When Abby entered the house, she was amazed. The house was large and beautiful, but its furnishings were simple and practical. It looked more like a hunting lodge than a living space. "I have salted pork and cookies. I can heat it up if anyone is hungry," Desiree said rather coldly, clearly hoping that no one would agree. "And the gravy?" Zeb asked, ignoring her tone. "Gravy," whined Mo. Desiree glared at her father reproachfully. "Okay," Desiree sighed. "Dad, take them to the living room. I'll go cook." "Is the jug still behind the chair?" Zeb grinned. Desiree snorted and walked into the kitchen. "Can I help?" Abby asked softly. "I don't need." "And I want to help," Mo screamed, trying to get out of her grandfather's arms. Desiree sighed, looking at her daughter. "Okay, apparently, I still need help." While the men settled down in the living room with a large jug of moonshine, Abby followed Desiree and her daughter into the kitchen. While Mom played with a small spoon and a saucepan, Abby broke the awkward silence. "She's beautiful," Abby said, looking at the girl. "She's a hurricane," Desiree answered, without looking up from her work. "Is Jeremiah her father?" Abby asked softly. Desiree froze and looked at her. "No, Mo's father died before she was born. He worked in one of Mr. Jenkins and Horace Tabor's mines. The fever took him away 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. At that time, I was helping my dad at the View Hotel. Then Mr. Jenkins built this beautiful house and hired me, pregnant and tired, to work here. I think he did it out of charity, but I was grateful. That's when I really got to know Jeremiah. I had seen him in Ashcroft several times before. He followed Mr. Jenkins here from Leadville and worked in the mines for a time. One day, Jeremiah overheard one of the accountants saying something strange to Mr. Jenkins. He later approached Mr. Jenkins and shared his suspicions. It turned out that the accountant was pocketing part of the profits. "Yes," Abby agreed. "Jeremiah has always been good with numbers and accounting." Well, Mr. Jenkins was impressed and transferred him from the mine to here. I think that he should keep an eye on me, but also that he should start checking the books of each mine. What Jeremiah didn't understand, he asked other accountants. He found some inconsistencies, not as serious as the man who stole, but important. This helped matters. He's done very well over the years. Desiree looked at Abby and paused, as if deciding whether she should continue. Abby stared back and finally decided to ask a very personal question. "Are you," Abby began, "that is, Jeremiah and I are a couple?" Desiree asked with a grin. "Not anymore, although it was a couple of years ago. Jeremiah helped me when I was so busy with Mo that I could barely manage housework. He talked to me in the evenings when I was lonely and took care of me. After Mo was born, he took care of us both. When I first met him, he was so wounded. Not outside, but inside. We helped each other, I think. But we became lovers only a couple of months after Mo was born. There was something between us from the very beginning. We didn't make eye contact with each other, but there was some kind of feeling. He's a damn good man, but we didn't plan to spend our whole lives together. Still, I spent many nights in his bed, and I don't think he complained. And then Mrs. Tabor's big party happened, and a couple of months later everything changed." "What happened then?" Abby asked softly. "Why has everything changed?" "Jeremiah met someone. Well." Desiree trailed off. "Well, special." "Whom?" Abby asked, and immediately realized that she had gone too far. Desiree's eyes flashed, her body tensed, and a cold and dangerous expression appeared on her face. "What do you care about?" she barked. "You threw him out like a chamber pot." I don't. Abby began. Don't lie to me, bitch, Desiree growled. I know who you are. When I first met him, he was like a man living day by day, praying that this day would be his last. It was only after Mo was born that I saw life in his eyes again. So don't pretend like you care. I know what you and those bastards in there did to him, and it almost killed him. Abby protested loudly, her own anger boiling over. What did he do to me? And what did he do? He cheated on me and made the child different. Who said that? The same girl he cheated with. What if she lied? Why would she lie? I don't know. Why would she lie? What reason could she have? She wouldn't lie, Abby screamed. Jeremiah was wrong, Desiree chuckled. You're not blind, you're stupid as a plug. Hey, Zeb shouted from the living room. Do you need help there? Come into my kitchen, old man, Desiree shouted back, and I'll hit you over the head with a frying pan. Desiree looked at her daughter, whose eyes were huge with fear. Baby, go to Grandpa and ask him if he's going to hell for drinking so much like the preacher says. Okay, Mom, the girl said, throwing her toys and running into the living room. A few seconds later, Zeb's voice was heard. It's not fair, Ray. Yes, it's not fair, she shouted back, so don't interfere. Turning to Abby, she smiled tightly, a smile that gave Abby goosebumps. So where are we? Oh yes, you were going to tell me why you believed this woman and not your husband. No, wait, you didn't even give him a chance to defend himself, did you? He disappeared for 2 months. Did you even try to find him, or did you immediately climb into bed with his brother that same night? It wasn't like that. Then you better come up with a good story and a decent explanation for Jeremiah when he returns. Because if not, he will throw you out of this area, no matter how huge that Viking of yours is inside. Abby took a deep breath and suppressed her response. They needed to talk to Jeremiah as calmly as possible. If this is just the beginning, the conversation ahead will be terrible. They worked silently with Desiree, preparing and serving a modest dinner. A few hours later, shortly before sunset, they heard dogs barking, warning of someone's approach. Minutes later, they heard muffled voices outside. Abby realized that Desiree had gone out to talk to Jeremiah before he entered. Perhaps she was telling him that everything was safe. Abby's stomach dropped as her ex-husband entered the house. He looked almost the same as he did 5 years ago, maybe a little thinner. He was no longer clean-shaven, which Abby had always liked, but instead sported a neatly trimmed mustache and goatee. His soft smile also disappeared, and his eyes were cold and hard. It was a fool's errand, she thought again. Jeremiah seemed ready to yell at them, but was interrupted. The little girl screamed and rushed towards him. Without looking, he picked her up and spun her around. Her happy squeal filled the room with joy for a moment. Jeremiah hugged her tightly, and Abby felt a pang of sadness, remembering how he circled little Sarah in the same way. Mo, little naughty girl, find your mother, he said, putting the girl down. She's outside with your grandpa and Robbie. When the girl ran out, the smile disappeared, and Jeremiah looked at them again with a cold, hard look. What do you want? He asked coldly. Mr. Hawthorne, began Mr. Horace, we have come with an offer that I think you will find very advantageous. I remember you. You are King Henry's talker. Have you thrown any orphans or widows out into the streets this month? I'm sure they will give you a bonus for this, since you sold your soul to the devil. Mr. Hawthorne, I assure you. Stop, Jeremiah interrupted him. Your assurances mean nothing to me. I would trust a rattlesnake sooner than any of you. Be that as it may, sir, I am confident that we have a business proposal that will benefit all parties. Jeremiah was not going to laugh. So King Henry has finally learned that he doesn't control the ranch. Found out about the stables in Leadville, huh? Well, yes. We were all quite surprised. I'm sure they were. My old man may not have been quite himself when he came back from the war, but he could still smell a rat. He persuaded a bank in Leadville to give him money to enter into a share with one of his colleagues and buy that stable. He left most of our ranch as collateral. Every month the profit was divided, and our part went to pay off the loan, and the rest provided for the maintenance of my mother after his death. That way she would have a steady income no matter what happened to the ranch. He put everything in the name of me and my mother because he knew I wouldn't leave her, Jeremiah said, looking at Thomas. He would have left it to both of us if you hadn't run away. I never wanted to stay on the ranch, Thomas answered calmly. But when you left, you broke both your mom's and Abby's hearts. I needed to leave and start my own life. I have no complaints against you. But that didn't stop you from coming back and claiming what didn't belong to you, did it, dear brother? Gentlemen, please, Horace exclaimed. It's no use. Who said I was trying to be useful? Jeremiah barked. Mr. Hawthorne, I understand that you are angry and feel betrayed. I was betrayed. I was stabbed in the back by those I loved and trusted. So why are you here? Please, Jeremiah, Abby suddenly exclaimed. Please listen to us. How did you listen to me? Abby blushed and then said very softly, You are right. What happened that day was wrong. Everything was bad, and it got even worse. I'm sorry for the way we attacked you then. You, Thomas, and I need to sit down and talk. We all have something to say. But first you need to hear what Mr. Horace has to offer so that everyone's cards are up. Please, Jeremiah, just listen to him. Okay, Jeremiah growled, heading towards the chair. Let's get this over with. Sitting down, he waited until everyone took their seats. You talk, he continued, looking at Horace. How are you going to bribe me this time? Mr. Hawthorne, Horace began, not reacting to hostility. I am here to offer you several things in exchange for all or part of your shares in the ranch. Jeremiah shook his head and snorted. And what do you have that might interest me? For starters, I have a significant amount of money. Jeremiah showed no reaction. Besides, Horace continued, I have deeds to several plots of land in Thompsonville that could serve as security for any deal we enter into. Go on, Jeremiah said shortly. Besides this, I have reliable information that the incident with Pedro Mendez can be completely hushed up. There will no longer be a threat of a warrant for your arrest. Jeremiah sat back and thought. This is all? He asked calmly. No, Horace continued, smiling. In addition to helping you resolve your differences with your brother and ex-wife, we have information that will help you reunite with your daughter Sarah. Is it true? Jeremiah asked suspiciously. And why isn't she here? Unfortunately, she ran away. Escaped? Why did she run away? She ran away, Thomas chimed in, because she didn't like me spanking her when she crossed the line. She always hated me because I married Abby. Smart girl. Do you like spanking teenagers, bro? Jeremiah muttered, his eyes sparkling. Calm down, sir, Horace said in an even voice. Where is she? We know where she is, and she's safe. We are ready to share this information as soon as we complete our case. Mr. Hawthorne, obviously you don't want to go back to the valley. Why would you want to stay connected to a place that disgusts you? I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement. You're right about one thing, Jeremiah said, looking at Thomas and Abby. I don't have the slightest desire to return to that valley. Since Sarah is no longer there, there is no one left for me to care about. Jeremiah, Abby said softly, I'm sorry for the way we treated you back then. Everything was so confusing. I know I treated you unfairly. Unfair? Wow, Jeremiah chuckled. I'm being thrown into the Denver City jail for a fight I didn't start. People I don't know lie about me, and I spend 2 months behind bars. And when I return home, I discover that I was convicted without the right to defense, and my wife is now sleeping with my brother. I always knew that you had a soft spot for Thomas, but I thought that by marrying me, you would remain mine, and I never thought that you would share a bed with another woman, and you'll take her too. You still don't believe me? Still don't believe that I was framed and that King Henry was behind everything? No, he wouldn't do that. I heard that the statements of Pedro and Maria are kept in Denver, and they swore that they were forced to lie. "Mr. Hawthorne," began Horace. "Shut up, talker. Now it's my turn. They told the Denver sheriff that they had been threatened, that the Swede made them lie and then shot Pedro to frame me." "Liar," Swede barked, getting up. He froze when he heard the click of a cocked gun. Everyone turned to the tall woman standing in the doorway with a gun aimed at Swede's chest. "Sit back down," she said coldly, "or I swear to God, I'll kill you right here." The tall man slowly sank back into his chair. Jeremiah and S.H. Ved glared at each other. "Don't believe me," Jeremiah said dryly. "Go to Denver and see for yourself." Abby looked at Jeremiah, then at Swede. Her stomach lurched with the sudden realization that she might have been tricked. This unpleasant thought slowly crept into her consciousness. However, Jeremiah was not going to stop. "But I have a couple of questions for you too," her ex-husband said, looking at her and Thomas. "Of course, both of you." Jeremiah's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Don't you find it suspicious that my errant brother returned so soon after I left?" Abby remained silent, and Thomas answered. "Henry sent me a telegram a few days after your disappearance when the Mendices came here." "How did he know how to find you?" "He contacted me a few months before." "You didn't tell me that?" Abby gasped. Thomas looked at her innocently. "What was there to tell? Your father sent me a letter asking me to come home. He hoped that I could help persuade Jeremiah to pool our resources and offer a deal to the railroad. I wasn't interested in coming back until I heard about all your problems, Jeremiah. Brother, I'm sorry that things turned out this way for you, but I didn't come back with the intention of taking your place. When I arrived, you had already disappeared, and Abby was alone and unhappy. I stayed for her. So Henry sent someone to find you before he sent that letter?" Jeremiah asked calmly, and Thomas nodded. "And then Henry sent someone to find me here in Ashcroft." Thomas nodded again. "Then why was he able to find you, Thomas, after 10 years of searching for gold, and me after 5 years of absence, but could not find me, sitting in a damned Denver prison for 2 months? Of course you both were looking for me, right? Surely Mr. Lawyer here knew I was contacting his Denver office. It wouldn't be that hard to ask someone at the sheriff's department about me, would it?" Neither Abby nor Thomas could continue to look him in the eye. The feeling of guilt was clearly visible on their faces. "The truth is," Jeremiah continued, "that none of you cared whether I returned or not. I was already guilty and convicted without any trial. You both have already cheated on me. You stuck a knife in the back of the man you said you loved, your own blood. So you can take your pathetic apology and burn in hell." Jeremiah stood in front of them, challenging their views. His face was contorted in pain, and his nostrils flared, like a bull's before attacking. After a few moments of awkward silence, Jeremiah turned to Mr. Horace. "So this is my answer, lawyer." "Mr. Hawthorne," Horace began again, "you don't have anything I need. I don't trust you enough to believe that you actually know where my daughter is, and there isn't enough gold in these mountains for you to bribe me. Return to your master and tell him that hell would sooner freeze over before he ever gets our lands. It's dark now, so I won't throw you out of here right now, but I want you to be gone by morning. Abigail, you can stay in one of the rooms in the house. Zeb, you and Robbie stay here too, and let these 3 get the barracks. Let the trunks remain in the chest until you leave, understand?" Most nodded as Jeremiah headed towards the door and called out to Robbie. Everyone heard him run up to the house. "Robbie, I'm leaving at dawn to meet Ambrose and the others. Get my horse ready, okay?" "Of course, Jeremiah." Jeremiah turned to the group. "You have a few minutes before Robbie lets the dogs out for the night, so I wouldn't waste any time here. Let the trunks remain in the chest. And be careful at night, dogs. Don't joke around here. And now I'm tired. Sorry, but I'm going to bed." With these words, the group slowly dispersed. Soon everyone heard dogs barking in the yard, guarding the territory. Jeremiah mounted his horse. The sun was just rising, and he knew that it would still be dark in some parts of Taylor's Pass. "You need to be careful, some of the cliffs, they are very steep." He slowly looked at Robbie and nodded. Has he left? Robbie nodded and grinned. At night. Probably before I let the dogs out. Jeremiah nodded in agreement. Robbie, take the dogs away and stay alert. Keep an eye on Ray and Mo. I hope to see you later today, and if not, tomorrow morning. Of course, Jeremiah, Robbie nodded. Jeremiah sighed heavily and slowly drove out. His skin broke out in goosebumps and his heart was pounding. He knew that Horace would not give up so easily. Thoughts about the next step of Horace, and most likely King Henry, worried him. However, the process had already started, and stopping it was like stopping a rockfall. As he drove, a smile appeared on his face. He heard Robbie yelling at the dogs. If anyone else was sleeping, they were definitely awake now. Jeremiah knew he had to be careful. A difficult road lay ahead of him. Those parts of the road that are bathed in sun will be stunningly beautiful, but those that are hidden in the shadows can be dangerous. Taking a deep breath, he tried to clear his mind. The meeting with Abby and Thomas reopened old wounds. Anger and resentment rose again from the bottom of his soul, threatening to overwhelm him. He forced himself to concentrate and remain vigilant. Meanwhile, at the Jenkins farm, everyone gathered for breakfast. Ray served biscuits and gravy, much to Mo's delight. "Where is Swede?" Abby asked Thomas. "Don't know. He spent the night in a barn." "In the shed?" "Yeah, he snores so much it's like a train is going by, so he agreed to sleep there himself." "Probably still there." Abby turned around and was alarmed to notice the fear in Desiree's eyes. Jeremiah slowly descended on his horse into a small, shaded ravine. His eyes were still adjusting to the darkness when he heard the click of a gun being cocked. He jumped off his horse and ran away from the sound just at the moment when a deafening shot broke the silence. The dogs barked loudly to announce the approach of someone stranger. Everyone began to go out onto the porch. Before leaving, Thomas went to the chest and took out his pistol, which he had left there when he first arrived. By the time he went outside, everyone could already see one horse with two riders slowly approaching the house. Jeremiah and Zeb dismounted and Jeremiah said a few words to Robbie. Robbie jumped back on his horse and quickly rode back to Taylor's Pass. As Jeremiah and Zeb began to approach, Abby noticed the fury on her ex-husband's face. She noticed that his hand did not leave the pistol grip. She felt Thomas slowly begin to move away. Suddenly, Jeremiah pulled out his gun and aimed it straight at Thomas. "Reach your weapon, you bastard," Jeremiah growled, "and I'll blow your brains out, whether you're related to me or not. Now slowly throw that revolver onto the porch. And you," he growled at Horace, "I hope you're not hiding anything in your luxurious rags." "I assure you." "Bullshit. Zeb, search him. If you find a weapon, gut it like a fish." Zeb smiled and took out a long, thin knife. Horace turned pale and raised his hands. "Inner jacket pocket," he muttered in a trembling voice. Zeb reached into the lawyer's jacket and pulled out a small single-shot pistol. "Mr. Hawthorne," Horace began, but Jeremiah interrupted him. "If you say, 'I assure,' one more time, I'll shoot you. You're lucky you didn't try to get him. Otherwise, you'd be deader than that Swedish bastard." "What?" Abby gasped. "That bastard tried to attack me near Taylor Pass. He snuck up behind me and was about to shoot me, but old Zeb put him down." Is he dead?" Horace looked shocked. "Where is the body?" "At the bottom of an old abandoned mine," Jeremiah grinned. "I hope he's entertaining the ghost miners now." "Are you sure he's dead?" Thomas asked. "As sure as I am standing here," Zeb grinned. "I made a hole in his back." "Did you shoot him in the back?" "He was going to shoot your brother in the back. I just beat him to it. Now that I feel a little safer." Jeremiah looked at Abby and frowned. "Ray, search her," he said, pointing at Abby. "Make sure she's not hiding anything." "Jeremiah!" Abby exclaimed. "I would never. You can't believe it." "Why should I trust you?" There was no answer, only awkward silence. "Take her inside, Ray." As the two women disappeared into the house, Thomas cleared his throat. "Do you really think Abby has a gun?" "I don't think I trust any of you." "Aren't you worried at all that she might have a weapon?" Thomas asked mockingly, nodding towards the house. Jeremiah and Zeb just grinned. Thomas, said Jeremiah coldly, is such a sweet girl like Ray here among these wolves, both human and animal. I would put her against any of you, except perhaps the Swede. Although no, perhaps it's against him too, now that he's feeding the worms. As if on cue, both women went outside again. There's nothing there, Desiree grinned. At least it's nothing special. Abby felt her face flush, but Zeb's laughter seemed to ease the tension somewhat. The next 2 hours were filled with accusations and denials. Abby and the others denied having anything to do with what happened, and Jeremiah called them liars. The two groups had finally reached a frustrating stalemate in their argument when Robbie's voice was heard in the distance, announcing his return. Slowly, everyone began to leave the house to meet the returning group. Abby was surprised to see Robbie leading a group of 4 men, 1 white and 1 black, and 2 teenagers, a skinny boy and a girl. Despite the fact that the girl was dressed in typically masculine clothes, Abby recognized her immediately. It was her daughter, Sarah. Thank God she's safe, Abby sighed with relief, and then a thought struck her. That's how he knew so much. Of course, she told him her version, and he believed her. Her gaze slowly moved to the men as they dismounted. An older white man with a gray beard carried himself with the confidence of a leader. It was Ambrose, undoubtedly the leader of the group. Next to him was a tall black man. Buckman was right. He was not as tall as the Swede, but just as muscular. His thick black beard was darker than midnight, and his white-toothed smile resembled a crescent moon in a starless sky. A young man named Sam got off his horse, and Abby immediately understood why Buckman called him Molly. He really had feminine characteristics. She suggested that he was probably a sickly child. His clothes were baggy and ill-fitting, and his hairless face was almost completely hidden under a wide hat. To her amazement, he ran to Jeremiah and threw himself into his arms. Even from where Abby stood, she could hear his quiet sobs. "Thought, lost you died," Sam said brokenly as Jeremiah gently consoled him. "Good afternoon." Ambrose's booming voice rang out, attracting everyone's attention. "My name is Ambrose, and this is Mr. Jacob," he said, pointing to his black companion. "And of course, you already know Miss Sarah. She has already told us a lot of interesting things about you. And this is Sam." He grinned. The whole group turned around to see Sam kiss Jeremiah passionately. The entire Hawthorne company froze in stunned silence. "What happened, Mom?" Sarah asked mockingly. "Nothing. I just didn't realize." Abby paused, looking at her daughter. "I mean, I know there aren't many women here, but—" Sarah laughed and pointed at the couple. "Look more closely, Mom. Don't let the clothes fool you." Sam's hat fell to the ground, revealing the long blonde braid it had been hiding. "Mom, let me introduce Sam," Sarah grinned. "Or rather, Samantha. She is Daddy's fiancée. Bride?" Sarah nodded as the couple slowly walked towards the group, hand in hand. Abby was startled by the look on Samantha's face. It distorted as if she sensed something disgusting. "I know why you're here," Samantha said with contempt. "And I know that one of you tried to kill my Jeremiah. Get off my land." "Your land?" Thomas asked in surprise. "Sorry," Sarah smiled. "I should have introduced her better. Miss Samantha Jenkins Wilcox. This is my mother and her pathetic version of a husband. Get out of here before it gets dark," Samantha stated firmly, turned around and led Jeremiah away. "The girl has character," Ambrose grinned. "She dresses this way to avoid unnecessary attention. The mine owner's daughter walking through the woods. It's strange, but it makes a certain sense, doesn't it?" "But we're not finished," Horace began. "The lady said," Jacob growled, "you better get out before dark." "If I were you, I would heed this advice." Jacob's look made it clear to Thomas and Horace that they were in danger. The tension was relieved by Ambrose's strong voice. "I'm sure there are many questions left that need to be discussed. But it seems we all need time to cool down. I suggest you return to the View Hotel. We will have time to get ourselves in order, and in the evening we will get together for dinner and discuss everything. Zeb, can you persuade Widow Brown to cook something for a large company? I think he can handle it, Zeb chuckled. It's been a while since there's been such a feast at the hotel. We'll pay you well for your troubles. With that, they headed into the house, leaving Abby, Thomas, and Horace alone. The ride into town passed in silence. At the hotel, they gathered in one of the rooms. Abby spoke first. This is true, she spat in Thomas's face. Is what Jeremiah said true? What exactly? What did he say about the Mendez family? How should I know? Abigail, I wasn't even there. And we don't even know if it's true or just rumors, Horace added calmly. But it matters, Abby hissed. Because if I was deceived, then I betrayed Jeremiah before he betrayed me. My revenge was not justified because I cheated on him with his brother. Sorry, Horace said softly. I didn't mean to say that it doesn't matter. But it's important to me, Abby interrupted. If this is true, I must interrogate those who lied to me. I understand that, Mr. Horace, but it changes a lot of things in my thoughts. If this is true, then I need to interrogate those who lied to me. I need to know if my father was involved in this. However, Jeremiah was right about one thing. I did not ask my father to look for him. I was so angry and hurt. Abby, you can't blame yourself. Thomas began. Of course I can. I didn't believe him when he returned. So who should I blame? You, Thomas? You didn't go looking for him either. You're right, I didn't go. I had been away so long that I didn't know whether Jeremiah was capable of such things or not. Instead, I tried to comfort and protect you. Abby turned and glared at the lawyer. Did my father know, Mr. Horace? What? Did you and my father know that Jeremiah was in prison in Denver? Yes, Horace sighed. We found out he was there. And you never told me. What would be the point, Mrs. Hawthorne? The men's have already talked to you and left. A warrant for his arrest has already been suspended. And frankly, ma'am, you've already shared a bed with Thomas. What would change if we told you this? I don't know, Abby muttered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Maybe it would have changed the way I felt about him when he came home. Please, Mrs. Hawthorne, your knowledge of this would not have changed the outcome of our encounter with Jeremiah. Everything has already been done. Now, Horace continued, we must now accept the fact that we have little to convince your ex-husband to sell at least part of the ranch to Henry. Now we have to convince him to join us, to make him our partner. Good luck with that, Thomas grumbled. He obviously hates us. He thinks we sent the Swede to kill him. Yes, Horace sighed. It's a pity that the Swede did that. I don't know what he was thinking about. All three stood and silently looked at each other. Ambrose's party arrived at the View Hotel just before sunset. The practical, protective clothing needed for hunting and fishing has disappeared. In its place were outfits that showed that Ambrose, Samantha, and even Jacob belonged to Denver's high society. Sarah, Desiree, and Monique were dressed in the usual dresses of the time and looked like the young ladies that they were. Samantha walked arm in arm with Jeremiah, who was still dressed in simple clothes but looked neat. However, Samantha's transformation was amazing. The shy boy turned into an attractive, graceful woman who was not afraid to look people in the eye. She wore an elegant Victorian dress that accentuated her petite curves. Although Desiree and Abby were considered more naturally beautiful, Samantha's presence attracted everyone's attention. "Oh my God, Miss Jenkins," Zeb exclaimed. "What a beauty you are. I haven't seen you in the parade since we were at Mrs. Augusta Tabor's party a couple of years ago." "It's been a long time, good sir," Samantha smiled and curtsied. "This dress has been packed since then. But tonight is a special occasion. Oh yes, you are heading back to Leadville, and Jeremiah will join you a little later." "Yes, but we will only stay in Leadville until the wedding. Then we head to Denver. What a surprise. So this is a real farewell party." Samantha nodded. "Then I'll add something too. After Jeremiah leaves, I will take Desiree and Lil Mo with me to Louisiana. Is it true?" "I thought you were heading to Aspen," Ambrose interjected. No, I've been doing this too long, Zeb sighed. Not the life I wanted to give Desiree, and definitely not the one I want for Lil Mo. Now come in and take your seats. This is probably the last time there will be so many people and food in the lobby of this hotel. Widow Brown has outdone herself and made fried chicken with tons of goodies. She's really special, Jeremiah said, grinning. Maybe she'll like Louisiana? Desiree laughed and Zeb smiled widely. Well, he drawled, I think I've already asked her about this. She will come with us. Together with Robbie, Desiree added, laughing. Yes, groaned Zeb, and with all those damn dogs. We'll look like immigrants heading east to Louisiana instead of west. The company laughed and congratulated him. Soon everyone took their places. The tension in the air did not stop them from enjoying a wonderful meal. Serious discussions about the purpose of the Hawthorns' visit were put aside, and the conversation concerned mines, weather, and Denver. At the end of dinner, Ambrose produced 2 bottles of fine port. When everyone was full, he cleared his throat. I think we should move on to the main purpose of this meeting, he began. First of all, we never finished dating. Jeremiah and Sarah have already told us who you are, but let me introduce myself. My name is Ambrose Whitebrack. Perhaps you have heard of my brother, Robert Whitebrack. He was treasurer of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad at the time of that little incident with Bat Masterton. Mrs. Hawthorne, I am sure you have doubts about the reliability of the information that Jeremiah told you yesterday. The Pinkerton detectives I hired were very thorough. I know that the certificates in question have been notarized and are kept in a safe deposit box in Denver. Mr. Whitebrack, Horace interrupted, his voice betraying alarm. I hope you're not implying that. I'm not hinting at anything, Mr. Horace. I'm simply stating that we have the notarized testimony of Pedro and Maria Mendez regarding the false charges associated with Jeremiah's arrest warrant and his alleged indiscretion. In their testimony, they clearly state that they were intimidated into giving false testimony against Jeremiah. They claim that it was the Swede who threatened them and that it was he who fired, or rather grazed, Mr. Mendez's hand. Mr. Horace, we both know that the frontier courts are a very dubious institution. Here, justice is meted out more by a bag of coins or the barrel of a gun than by our legal system. These depositions were taken to expose the lies surrounding Jeremiah. Whether they relate to your current employer, everyone can decide for themselves. In any case, there is no warrant for Jeremiah's arrest, and any charges against him may be denied. Now, Jeremiah has told us all exactly what you demanded of him. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that Jeremiah couldn't give you what you wanted, even if he wanted to. But he doesn't want to, Sam chimed in, causing several people at the table to smile. Sorry, she added sheepishly as Jeremiah reached out and took her hand. His loving smile was more eloquent than any words. Never apologize for protecting your man, my dear, Ambrose chuckled. You see, Ambrose continued, addressing everyone present, he can't give you what you want because he no longer owns the business or any of its assets. What? Thomas and Horace exclaimed in one voice. That's right, Jeremiah said, grinning. I sold the stable to my father's partner and paid off the rest of the debt. Then I sold my interest in the ranch. It no longer brought me anything but bad memories. So when one lovely young lady accepted my marriage proposal, I sold it. Everything has already been signed, agreed upon, and will come into force the day after our wedding. The deal secured me a position at a bank in Denver. I will have a small share in this bank and will work and study banking under the guidance of a mentor. This may sound boring to you, but thanks to this, I will be able to provide a future for my wife and children. But why? Abby asked quietly, looking at Jeremiah. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why? Jeremiah growled. You ambushed me, again. And then you tell me stories about how sorry you are and try to bribe me with my own daughter. Why would I trust you? I wasn't sure how far you were willing to go to get what you wanted, since you brought a Swede with you. I understood that I was in danger, but I was better than my friends and family. I knew Zeb would protect Desiree and Lil Mo. I also thought you didn't know about Ambrose and Sam. and I was almost sure that you didn't know about Sarah either. The simple truth is that I would rather die than let anyone hurt one of my girls." Sam hugged his hand and beamed with happiness. "I met with Zeb last night and told him that if anything happens, it will be connected with the Swede. It turned out I was right. Zeb followed him and saw him take his gun out of the wagon and head towards Taylor's Pass. When he tried to ambush me, Zeb put him down like a rabid dog. Now I can focus on my future. I was happy at the ranch. I had a wife and daughter that I loved, but one of them was taken from me and the other broke my heart. Good people returned my daughter to me, and an angel healed my heart. And now I look forward to hugging this angel every night." "Did someone give you Sarah back?" Abby asked. Jeremiah nodded and looked at Ambrose. "When I ran away, the angels must have been watching over me," Sarah interjected. "At first, I didn't know where to go, but I heard you say that Dad was in Denver before he came back that day, so I went to Colorado Springs first. There, I was fortunate to join my family on their way to Denver. When I arrived in Denver, I started asking around at the city jail. Then I went to one of the churches. The Reverend and his wife took me in for a few days and then introduced me to Mr. Ambrose. Mr. Ambrose took me to Leadville to see Sam. She took me in. Everyone was told that I was her new maid." "Why?" Abby asked. "Well, it was at my suggestion," Ambrose explained. "You see, I wasn't quite ready at the time." "Ready for what?" asked Mr. Horace. "To tell the truth, I was not ready for this visit. I needed to make sure your man couldn't track Sarah to Jeremiah too quickly. There were several unfinished matters that required my attention. Fortunately, they were settled long before your man arrived in Ashcroft." "I have one more small confession," Ambrose chuckled. "I didn't bring Sarah back to her father with the most honorable intentions. I knew that Jeremiah was a fair man and that my gift would influence his decision to sell. Jeremiah sold his share to me and my partners. This is also our bank, and I will be working with Jeremiah. He has a great financial mind and will do well, and the fact that he and his future wife have a stake in the bank is an added bonus. I didn't just buy Jeremiah out of respect for John Jenkins. I agree with Henry Thompson. Besides taking care of my good friend's daughter, who I love like my own, it is also a very worthwhile investment. Those mines that have already been found in the Pikes Peak region may already be completely depleted, but there is a good chance that all this gold came from somewhere. Sooner or later, someone will discover its source, and then this little valley will become extremely valuable. Having a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch gives me a foothold in this valley." "But Mr. Whitebrack," Horace began cautiously, "Henry Thompson owns most of this valley." "That's right, Mr. Horace. However, I bought out Jeremiah's share not only because it could be a profitable investment, but also because it gave me the opportunity to get a little revenge. You see, sir, my wife's cousin," Ambrose's voice became low and menacing, "lives in Kansas City. We're not particularly close to that side of the family, so my wife and I didn't find out about it until a few years ago. This cousin has a daughter who married a good young man. A few years ago, she went with him to Colorado to help his grandfather run a ranch. They were unlucky to arrive just at the height of the Railway War. As you know, there were a lot of dirty and dastardly things going on at that time. Not in their worst nightmares could they imagine that they would encounter people who would try to survive their grandfather from his land. Not just survive, but burn to the ground. They were threatened, terrorized by a huge blonde bear man. The husband still bears the burns on his hands that he received while trying to save his grandfather from a burning house. His last name was Wilson." Horace looked extremely uncomfortable. So you can imagine my surprise when I started talking to this man who had impressed my good friend. This man had won the heart of my friend's daughter, and his stories about the past sounded eerily familiar. I even found out that this Thompson has a man in his employ who is very reminiscent of the scoundrel who caused such harm to my wife's family. At this moment, I, of course, became very interested. And I was even more surprised to learn that this same man was buying up land and businesses in the area. It was a blessing from heaven to find out that he was way over his credit limit. It was fate itself. It took me a while, but in the end, I bought up all his debts. These were the very unfinished matters that required resolution. I figure I'll take almost everything he has, except his ranch, when I present all his obligations for payment at the end of the month. Damn it, it wouldn't even surprise me if this ranch didn't have a couple of accidental fires before winter. Ambrose's grin made everyone at the table shudder. By the law or by the gun, Mr. Horace. Please tell your employer that everyone associated with him will be in danger when this starts. Besides, sir, Denver is not the safest city even for lawyers. The table fell silent as everyone digested Ambrose's thinly veiled threat. And now that this unpleasant conversation is over, Ambrose continued, practically ignoring the guests from the Hawthorne party. Anyone want to join me and Jacob for a cigar? Hell yes, Zeb started from the kitchen doorway. Right after I help clean up here. Go ahead, Daddy, Desiree laughed. Sarah and I will help you finish. Zeb broke out into a wide smile. Jeremiah, asked Ambrose. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, Sam interjected. He needs to spend some time with his fiancée. Jeremiah, would you like to join me for a little walk? It's an honor for me. The couple stood up and walked out into the street arm in arm. Silently, the guests left the table and dispersed into small groups. Horace and Thomas went up to their rooms, and Abby lingered downstairs for a few minutes before sneaking out the back door. She needed to talk to Jeremiah and apologize. She also knew that Sam would not be happy about this interference. However, this was probably her last opportunity to talk to her ex-husband. As she approached, she heard their voices. Sorry, Jeremiah. I didn't want to be such a burden. Hush, dear. You are not a burden. I'm just scared. I know that they talk about me behind my back, that a man would only marry a witch like me for money. They say I'm a spoiled princess who probably drove her husband to his grave. But you know that's not true, right? Jeremiah chuckled and smiled. Yes, I know that is not true. However, about being spoiled. Okay, maybe they're right about that. Sam couldn't help but laugh. But I'm getting better. I was just so angry with James when he left me in Leadville and went to the mountains for a year to work in one of my father's mines. We haven't even been married for 2 years, and he's already left. He didn't even give me the child he promised. When they told me that he died of pneumonia, I broke down. I know a lot of people thought I was crazy, but it was just pain. It was the realization that the wonderful life I had imagined was dead. All I have left is the darkness and despair of a widow who is not yet 20. After that, I looked at every man who sought my hand through those dead eyes. I did this for 4 years and probably really turned into the harpy they think I am. I know I went to Mrs. Tabor's big reception screaming and resisting. I'm glad my father insisted on my presence. Only later did I find out that he wanted me to meet a man for whom he had great respect. It was you, Jeremiah Hawthorne, and when I first met you, I was ashamed. Ashamed? She nodded and smiled shyly at him. I wanted you to love me so much that it scared me. I haven't experienced anything like this since James. When you hugged me for the first time while dancing, I almost cried. This was the first time I allowed myself to hope for happiness. But then I looked at myself and the kind of person I had become. I swore to God right there that if you gave me a chance, I would become a woman you would be proud of. Samantha, I was always proud to be with you. Even when you were dressed like a man. Sam laughed and playfully slapped his arm. It was an honor to be with you, Jeremiah said in a solemn voice. Sam, I love you. Even though I sometimes act like a spoiled brat, even when I can't control my temper. I love you no matter what, Samantha Jenkins Wilcox. You say I changed your life, but you changed mine much more. You know how broken I was when we met. What they did to me almost killed me. I know, honey. That's why I get so angry at them. How can you do this to someone you supposedly love? Sorry if I got my claws out. Jeremiah laughed softly. Well, no one will say that they don't know how you feel. Jeremiah, I'm sorry. I really try. Hush, beauty. Everything is fine. It's nice to know that someone loves you enough to fight for you. Jeremiah's words touched Abby deeply. She tried but couldn't hold back her son. Who's here? Sam asked sharply. Sorry. What do you need? Sam was clearly starting to get angry, but Jeremiah hugged her and said softly. It's okay, honey, he said quietly. Let her say what she has to say. She can't hurt us. Abby watched as Sam literally melted in his arms. Her body relaxed, and Abby thought she even heard a slight sigh. Abby fought back the memories of how she had once felt safe in those arms. I just wanted to apologize to both of you. Samantha, I'm sorry that our visit put Jeremiah's life in danger. This was never my plan, and I will talk to my father when I get home. I will also ask him about the Mendez families and about old man Wilson. I just can't believe my dad was involved in all of this. But Jeremiah, I promise you I will ask. I just can't believe Dad is as angry as you think he is. Maybe he's not angry, Jeremiah snorted. Maybe he's just a damned marauder, feeds on the misfortunes of others. Be that as it may, I am sure that someday he will regret his actions. Whether you believe it or not will not change anything, but it may cost you dearly when everything comes back to haunt you. Do you really think that this Ambrose? Does he really? Yes, I believe that he will do exactly what he said. Ambrose is a good man, but he has a dark side. If the Swede was involved in what happened to old Wilson and the Ambrose family, then I have no doubt that he will carry out his threat. Abby, I don't hate you anymore, so I hope nothing happens to you. But I won't shed a tear if something bad happens to your father or Thomas. I know you don't want to believe it, but they took away everything good in my life. Thomas took my wife and daughter from me, and King Henry tried to take away the family ranch. I hope they both meet the Swede in hell. I think I can understand that. But for the way I treated you, and for betraying you and Thomas, I am truly sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, but we'll probably never see each other again, and I just wanted you to know. I hope you'll let Sarah visit me someday. Hardly. As long as Thomas and your father are around, I doubt she'll ever come. She nodded and wiped away a tear. Goodbye, Jeremiah. She turned around and walked back to the hotel, knowing that she had several long and difficult conversations ahead of her with her father. She also suspected that she would probably never see her ex-husband again. St. Louis, Missouri. Spring 1905. Abigail Hawthorne walked slowly into the cottage. The winter was long, but spring brought hope. She prayed that it would bring her new life too. 19 years have passed since they moved to St. Louis. After returning from Ashcroft, she spoke with her father. He admitted that he had secretly promised the Swede a share of the expected profits. Henry claimed that the Swede acted on his own, threatening the men's and trying to kill Jeremiah. He swore that he did not incite him to these actions, but admitted that he took advantage of their consequences. Abby wasn't entirely convinced, but shortly after their conversation, several events occurred that limited her options. First, Edmund Horace returned to Denver. A week later, he left the city. No one knew where he was going except for his last statement. Back to the east, where everything is more civilized. Thomas then gave up and sold the rest of the ranch to Ambrose. Then Thomas went back to prospecting in the west. Abby was torn as she watched him leave again, knowing that with the ranch sold and the people gone, her father was the only one left for her. She heard from Thomas a couple of years later when she received a telegram from him. She was from San Francisco and reported that they had found gold in the Klondike and it was going to Alaska. She never heard from him again. Ambrose Whitebrick was a man of his word. It took a little longer than expected, but by the spring of 1886, her father had sold almost everything to cover his debts. He managed to sell the ranch for a small profit, despite one of the barns burning to the ground just before Christmas. The remainder was enough to buy this small cottage and a small store. Henry Thompson left Colorado a very bitter man. He became even more depressed and desperate in 1891 when a major gold breakthrough occurred in the Cripple Creek and Victor areas. To serve these areas, the railroad built a spur that ran through their old valley. Ambrose Whitebrick and his investors are now even richer. The past many years have been difficult at times. Abby and Henry ran the store until Henry became too ill. She sold it last year to look after it. He died last December, and now she is left alone. She was alone, but it was partly her own choice. She had several suitors over the years, but she never felt like she could leave her father. The fans she liked the most seemed to her the most unpopular in her father's eyes. Now, at 50, she was alone. She walked over to the bed and sat down. The silence in the cottage was almost overwhelming. She reached out to a small decorated box that sat next to her bed. Opening it, she took out two items that were very dear to her, a letter and a telegram. The first was a letter received from Sarah 4 years ago. The second was a telegram received the day before. It was in response to a letter Abby had sent a month ago. She slowly unfolded the letter and began to read the words she already knew by heart. Dear Mother, I am writing to you to fulfill a promise to someone very dear to me. He thinks it will be helpful for me and those I love to write down my thoughts and feelings and send them to you. He said that whether you receive this letter or not, it will be good for me to write and say everything that I need to say. I won't tell you that I welcomed his request. I think he knows what he's talking about because he's a doctor. I also know that he loves me deeply and only cares about me. Honestly, I would do almost anything for Dr. Harold Thornton, my husband. I think I should get to the point. Mom, I forgive you. I forgive you for not believing me and not protecting me later. I won't tell you that I completely understand why you did what you did, but if it gives you peace, then you have my forgiveness. I hope you understand why I ran away. After I told you what Uncle Thomas did, none of you believed me. It was the same with Dad. None of you believed him either. I felt insecure, so I needed to find someone to take care of me. It was a miracle that I found Dad so quickly. An even bigger miracle was that I found Harold several years after Dad and Sam got married. I received a letter from Desiree a few months ago. She was the woman with the little girl you met at the Jenkins family near Ashcraft. She said that she was fine and that she had remarried. Little Mo is becoming a real beauty, and her grandfather is already threatening to punish some of the local boys if they are too cocky. Zeb and Widow Brown are still not married, but they are always together and will be so for the rest of their lives. It was Desiree's letter that gave Harold the idea for me to write to you. As I already said, I am now married to a doctor. You have 2 grandchildren, a boy, John Ambrose, and a girl, Samantha Desiree. We moved here to Santa Fe about 10 years ago with Dad and Sam and my half-sisters. Dad is the president of one of Ambrose's banks. He and Sam have 3 beautiful blonde hooligans. Of course, this is not entirely true. All 3 of my stepsisters are basically very sweet, but they all have Sam's personality. It's funny watching them at Dad's house. Each of them thinks that she holds it on her small fingers. It's even funnier when Sam shoos them away and sits on Daddy's lap, letting them know that Daddy belongs only to her and will always be hers. I swear I laugh every time I see all 3 girls with their lower lips hanging out and frowning. One day, I asked my dad if he was tired of the constant fuss because of 4 girls in the house. He just smiled and hugged me, saying that he missed the 5 years he spent without me and that this was heaven. He also said he couldn't ask for more. He has a wife who loves him as much as he loves her, 4 wonderful daughters, and a grandson and granddaughter who hung the moon. We have good homes, food on the table, and we are healthy. We even have a doctor in the family. He said we are very blessed. I couldn't agree more. Before I finish, I want to tell you that you can always visit us. I can't say Grandpa or Uncle Thomas will ever be happy, but you are. Even Sam said she would behave if you came. She has certainly changed over the years. She's much happier now. She says it's because of her dad, and while I'm sure that's true, she loves her 3 girls madly. Now I need to finish this letter. I have fulfilled my husband's wishes by writing this letter, and I think I will soon start working on his other wish. Harold is hinting that we will have another child. If you ever decide to come, just send a telegram with your arrival date, and we'll pick you up at the station. Best wishes from your daughter, Sarah. Abby wiped away her tears, carefully folded the scratched letter, and put it back in the box. Slowly, she unfolded the telegram. She waited until Henry had passed away and the cottage was in order before answering. She turned to Sarah, asking if the offer for a visit was still valid. Sarah responded the day before. "I'm looking forward to meeting you. Let's meet." The grandchildren are excited. Abby didn't know how things would turn out in the end, but she knew she had to try. Even if she only gets to see her grandchildren once, it will be worth it. She bought a train ticket to Santa Fe and sent a telegram with her arrival time within a day of receiving Sarah's reply. It was spring. Time for new beginnings. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.